You're listening to Law and Order: Criminal Justice System, a production of Wolf Entertainment and iHeart Podcasts.
In the criminal justice system, landmark trials transcend the courtroom to reshape the law. The brave men and women who investigate and prosecute these cases are part of a select group that has defined American history. These are their stories. May 5th, 1981, Bensonhurst, Brooklyn.
A group of men waited inside an empty nightclub. The 1979 murder of Carmine Galante 2 years before had resulted in a power struggle at the top of the Bonanno crime family, and these men were here to sort it out. The man calling the shots was 38-year-old Joe Massino, truck hijacker, ruthless killer, and loyal ally of Bonanno boss, Rusty Rastelli. Massino was also one of the men responsible for Carmine Galante's murder. On the agenda for the so-called administration meeting, peace talks, with three ambitious captains vying for control of the family in the wake of Galante's death. With one unassuming soldier in tow, the three capos entered the club unarmed, expecting a peaceful negotiation. As they neared, one of Massino's men discreetly ran a hand through his hair. It was a signal. 4 masked gunmen burst out of a closet, armed with pistols and a sawed-off shotgun. The three capos, they didn't stand a chance. Power was once again restored to Rusty Rastelli, while Joe Massino had amassed more influence than ever before, and he was far from finished.
You're not with the mob because you want to be. It's the gangster that decides whether you're his associate or not.
If you like your life, you will vote to acquit.
I'm Anna-Siga Nicolazzi.
My father should have been a dead man.
From Wolf Entertainment and iHeart Podcasts, this is Law and Order: Criminal Justice System. In our last episode, we brought you the story of Carmine Galante, a one-time hitman who rose through the ranks of organized crime to become the de facto boss of the Bonanno crime family. That is, until he was gunned down outside an Italian restaurant in Brooklyn in July of 1979. His murder would mark a seminal moment in not just the history of the mob in New York, but also in law enforcement's approach to investigating and prosecuting the Mafia. For nearly a century, the 5 families had used bribery, blackmail, extortion, and murder to control the city with little or no opposition from law enforcement. And by the end of the 1970s, their power had reached new heights. But after Galante's murder, that was all about to change. Armed with what was then cutting-edge technology, the FBI knew that the best way to crack a code of silence was to infiltrate the very homes and hangouts of mobsters, eavesdropping on their conversations. To accomplish this, they would rely on an array of hidden bugs and wiretaps placed by a team of fearless undercover operatives, known as black bag agents.
We did have black bags on occasion, but any bag would work if you had to, slip into someplace. My name is Joseph Cantamessa. I was a special agent with the FBI for 22 years. I retired in 1998.
Joe was one of the Bureau's most successful tech specialists, whose work directly led to the incarceration of countless members of organized crime. But at the time of the 3 capos murder in 1981, Joe was a young agent working undercover as a phone repairman in Little Italy, known to locals as
Joe Aquino, Aquino. Complete identity, backstopped if necessary, driver's license, vehicle registration, real true address if you wanted to check it. Joe was a phone man, but I could have been an electrician. I could have been a TV repairman. I had different identities for different companies.
And much like a spy, before even attempting to bug his prospective target, Joe took meticulous care in building his backstory to establish himself as a believable and familiar member of the neighborhood.
Little Italy, it's a pretty popular touristy kind of place. There are regulars there, and there are a few social clubs there, and they pretty much pay attention to what's going on unless you're a tourist.
These social clubs were members only, commonly used as a base of operations for crime families.
For me to be recognized, I would show up on a frequent basis in my telephone truck. I would find the closest social club, and I would park right in front of the door, and I would get out and I would walk the neighborhood, going in and out of various front doors. You know, again, I've been ingratiating myself to the neighborhood, doing favors, because back then, the New York Telephone and the Bell system owned everything. You leased everything from the phone company. And here I am, the gracious guy who will occasionally throw a client a long cord or whatever. It took weeks for me to get recognized as somebody that belonged in the neighborhood.
The easiest part about fronting as a telephone repairman is that for Joe, it wasn't a lie, because he actually had the same job in high school.
Well, I was working for New Jersey Bell Telephone as a telephone installer repairman. There were only 2 truly former telephone installer repairmen as FBI agents in the entire organization. So we didn't have to figure out how to look like being a phone man. We were the phone man.
But given the kind of people he was up against, he would also need the ability to improvise and stay cool under pressure. One false move could mean his life.
I don't always know how it's going to play out. I know what I want to try and accomplish. You had to just kind of take what came along.
Like the time Joe was installing a microphone behind a telephone wall plate. His target became suspicious and started quizzing him.
The question came up as to where I was from, and I said East Bronx, right off of White Plains Road. And I started talking about, my aunt worked in Vaccaro's Bakery. My other aunt was a ticket taker at Wakefield. And I'm explaining all of this pretty confidently. And then he asks me a question or makes some statement about something that has nothing to do with this neighborhood.
Luckily, Joe immediately realized he was being tested.
I get a glance of his wife who's looking at him, and I turn to him and I go, "What part of the Bronx are you talking about?" He laughed, and that sort of cleared it up right away. He was throwing me a curve, and fortunately I picked up on it.
Much of Joe's success as an agent was emblematic of the changing strategy at the FBI. In the fight against the Mafia, the agents of the Bureau's past just weren't getting the results they wanted and that the public needed. But Joe had a natural edge when talking to mobsters because he grew up around them.
My grandparents on my father's side were very strong Northern Italians, and most of my formative years were actually in New Jersey, with regular trips back to the Bronx to see family members. And while my father was a law-abiding citizen, a few of our other family members got to be a little sketchy at times.
After a stint in the Army, Joe went back to work with a telephone company. But one of his neighbors, who happened to be an FBI agent, noticed Joe's natural ability with tech equipment and convinced him to pursue a career in law enforcement.
It was a gamble for me, again, because I barely got out of high school, but I took a chance.
And that chance paid off. Joe immediately excelled at his new gig, and it wasn't long before his unique skill set led him to the FBI's Special Operations Unit.
And I became the technical supervisor for SO1, FBI Special Operations in New York City.
Joe was one of a select group of agents utilizing the full resources and technology of the FBI to accomplish one mission: infiltrate and dismantle the Mafia from the top down. And over the next decade, the SO1 squad was relentless.
We did hundreds of surreptitious entries. nights, weekends, when a place was vacant. Surreptitious was always the preferred method to install electronic surveillance or tracking, etc. But there were many instances where the place was never vacant. When we were confronted with that, I could create a scenario and fabricate a problem that the subject would want to invite me in.
His targets, some of the most dangerous and ruthless criminals in America. But before we talk about all the ways law enforcement infiltrated the mob, I think it's important to understand a little bit more about how the commission came to be, and why for so many decades, authorities had been so ineffective in stopping them. By the 1970s, New York was in trouble.
Every week you would see something in the paper, a shooting between mob guys.
That's Jim Kostler, a former FBI special agent, and he witnessed the violence firsthand.
I was hired as a special agent with the FBI in 1970. I spent 8 years in Newark investigating organized crime. In 1979, I was promoted and sent to New York. My role was the position of labor racketeering program manager for the New York office.
Jim was persuaded to join the FBI by an agent he met at a party. Leaving behind his career as a special education teacher, he chose to serve the public in a new way. Back when Jim was starting his career, joining the FBI was the dream of every young kid interested in law enforcement. The image of the straight-backed all-American G-man was seared into popular culture. But the truth was that despite its reputation and resources, the Bureau was woefully behind in countering the Mafia. In fact, the Bureau was still under the control of its first director, a man who for decades refused to even acknowledge the existence of the mob.
You know, at that time, J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the FBI. It was much different than it is today, obviously.
During Hoover's first 30 years as director, not a single agent was assigned to work organized crime. Hoover even famously banned the use of the word mafia in internal reports, publicly downplaying mafiosos as mere hoodlums and a nuisance to be dealt with by local law enforcement. This resulted in what you could call a bottom-up approach to enforcing crime, focusing on individual perpetrators rather than the men at the top pulling the strings. It was a never-ending battle. Hoover's policy severely limited Jim's ability to fight organized crime.
The mission of the FBI at that point in time was every agent was given assignments to take responsibility for and to achieve something in a given period of time. The responsibility of every agent was to produce statistics. At the end of the year, when it came time for your evaluation, they looked at how many statistics you had for that year. How many people did you arrest? How many people did you put in jail? How much did you recover? Did you recover stolen goods and so forth?
And while handfuls of low-level gangsters might be locked up, mob leadership went unscathed. At the heart of the problem was the way the FBI was organized.
When I got into organized crime in New Jersey, every morning we would come in and we'd say hello to each other, and then every agent on the squad would go their own way. It was disjointed in that sense. We didn't have a plan, just a matter of go find a gambler, go find a loan shark, and you'll be successful. I came to realize that that was not a good method, not a good system, because organized crime is organized. The folks that were involved in it had a structure, and they worked under a hierarchy. We didn't work as groups.
It turns out the FBI should have taken a lesson from the very men they were chasing. Translated from Italian, the term Cosa Nostra literally means our thing. But that seemingly innocuous designation is a ruse, because that thing, the Mafia, is actually a highly organized, highly regulated system of rules, ranks, and rituals that go back centuries. Much like an army, an organized crime family operates with a strict hierarchy, with soldiers, captains, underbosses, all reporting to a top boss. And then, as overseers of it all, the Commission, a secretive council composed of the 5 New York bosses. The commission ensured unity and coordination among crime families nationwide, usually under the threat of their iron fist. And it was this historical cooperation that gave the families their power, reach, and sense of invincibility. The commission's origins, however, were anything but civil.
So when the mob was first formed around 1930, it followed what was called the Castelmarisi War.
That's former prosecutor Ron Goldstock, who at the time was the director of the New York Organized Crime Task Force. And fair warning, we're going to be throwing a lot of names at you in the next couple minutes, but I promise there won't be a quiz. The Castelmarisi War was a bloody power struggle between two rival bosses, Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano. Both born in Sicily, both notoriously ruthless. But a cunning and ambitious young gangster by the name of Charles Lucky Luciano had his own eye on the top spot. In April of 1931, Luciano conspired with Maranzano to take out the competition. And so at a card game in Coney Island, Luciano casually excused himself from the table right before 4 gunmen entered the restaurant and opened fire, leaving Joe Masseria dead on the floor. As a result of the brazen hit, Luciano inherited all of Masseria's rackets. Maranzano then called a meeting with Luciano and the heads of the 3 other Mafia factions to establish the 5 families. But Maranzano wanted to retain ultimate power.
In order to deal with problems that came about because of competing interests of the families, he created a position for himself as boss of all bosses.
The boss of bosses. But Maranzano's reign was short-lived.
Luciano then had him killed, just as he was plotting to have Luciano killed, but Luciano was quicker.
In a plot befitting of Maranzano's nickname of Little Caesar, 4 men disguised as feds raided his office and stabbed the boss multiple times before shooting him in the head for good measure. Now with an opportunity to reign over the entire Mafia, Lucky Luciano faced a critical decision.
Luciano recognized that the position of boss of all bosses was problematic. You just created enemies. Because whenever you would rule on anything, you are always going to rule against somebody. And so you needed another vehicle for dealing with each of the family's competing interests. And so what he did was to create the commission.
5 seats, with each seat establishing equal representation. And to prevent the war from continuing, Luciano offered a commission seat to Maranzano's underboss, Joe Bonanno. Seeing it as the path to peace, Bonanno accepted. Luciano held a national conference in Chicago with the heads of the 5 New York families and over 20 other Mafia leaders from around the country. And it was there in Chicago that Luciano instituted many of the rules and traditions that would govern organized crime for decades to come.
So he established the position of consigliere, or counselor, which meant that the cap regime, if they had a problem with the boss, could go to somebody as an ombudsman, deal with him rather than having to confront the boss straight on.
As a trusted confidant to the boss, consigliere became one of the top 3 administrative positions, usually equal in rank to the underboss. With its rigid chain of command and sworn oaths of fidelity, the modern American Mafia was born. It would enjoy unrivaled prosperity for decades. Crime boss Joe Bonanno later described this period in his memoirs, writing that, and I quote, "For nearly a 30-year period after the Castelmarisi War, no internal squabbles marred the unity of our family, and no outside interference threatened the family or me." Everything would change in 1957, when 3 major events thrust Cosa Nostra out of the shadows and into the glare of the public spotlight. The first was the attempted assassination of Luciano family boss Frank Costello by up-and-comer Vincent the Chin Gigante. As Costello walked through the lobby of his apartment building, Gigante snuck up behind him and said, "This is for you, Frank." A hit that incredibly Costello survived. the bullet just grazing his forehead. But the real marvel is what happened next. Given the opportunity to identify his shooter in court, Costello refused to name Gigante. Here's defense attorney James Leonard.
During the trial, something right out of a movie, when Costello is asked if he recognizes the person that shot him, clearly he knows who shot him. Clearly he knows who Gigante is because Gigante is connected to Genovese. He says he can't identify him.
It was a striking example of the Mafia's infamous code of silence. But omerta, as it was known, was not just an oath of loyalty. It was the Mafia's single biggest defensive weapon against prosecution, denying law enforcement of cooperating witnesses in any potential trial. And in the case of Gigante, it likely saved him from a life in prison. In another scene worthy of a movie, Gigante leaned towards Costello while he was leaving the courtroom and whispered, "Thanks a lot, Frank." The second landmark event of mob lore from 1957 occurred a few months later when mob boss Albert Anastasia was shot and killed mid-shave in a Manhattan barbershop. It was more fallout from the botched Costello hit, and the very public midday murder was plastered all over every front page in New York. Unwilling to retaliate for the headshot and perhaps fed up with the treacherous mob life altogether, Frank Costello decided to go into early retirement, relinquishing full control of the Luciano family to his scheming underboss, Vito Genovese. Then, seeking to legitimize his power and rebrand the family name, Genovese called for a national meeting to be held in a sleepy farming town in upstate New York, which brings us to the third major mob event of 1957. Here's former prosecutor Gil Childers on what would prove to be a devastating misstep by mob leaders.
It was a national convention of La Cosa Nostra at a guy's house in Appalachian, New York. Nice house in a rural area. Everyone thought it was out of the way and safe and no one would find out about it. But a couple of the local policemen, two of them started noticing that there were a lot of out-of-state license plates driving through town.
Authorities ran the plates on a bunch of expensive cars and quickly learned that this convention wasn't your typical farmers' expo. So they set up roadblocks and descended upon the Appalachian estate.
And they all fled like cockroaches when you turn the light on in a New York City apartment.
Dozens of middle-aged and elderly mobsters in suits and dress shoes fled into the surrounding woods. Over 60 bosses, underbosses, consiglieres, and capos were eventually arrested. Troopers found an embarrassed Joe Bonanno running through a nearby cornfield.
That scene was comically captured in the movie Analyze This, where it shows a couple of mob guys riding a tractor all the way back to New York City to escape the cops from the time.
But more importantly, the Appalachian meeting signified actual proof, both to the public and the government, the existence of a nationwide criminal network. These were not just a random assortment of local hoodlums, as Hoover had described them. This was an organization. Here's Ron Goldstock.
The federal government was not involved in the investigation and prosecution of organized crime until the 70s. And it was only after the Appalachian meeting that the federal government first started to take a look at it.
Soon, local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies would launch a new line of attack against organized crime.
The FBI began to use electronic surveillance to investigate the mob, and they began to learn through the taps and bugs they had put in a great deal about the mob structure.
Armed with modern technology and a deeper understanding of their opponents and their weaknesses, small and nimble teams of undercover officers and agents began to infiltrate the dark underworld of Cosa Nostra, heralding the biggest offensive against organized crime the nation had ever seen. After that almost laughable roundup of mobsters in upstate New York, public awareness of the Mafia had reached new heights. Here again is defense attorney James Leonard.
When we get to the Bobby Kennedy era, it's a very different time. Now we know about the mob. We know that the mob exists. And ironically, one of the main reasons that we know about the mob is from a defector from within the Genovese crime family.
What is the name of it? It is
Cosa Nostra in Italian.
Cosa Nostra in Italian.
Our thing and our family in English.
That is an organization, is it?
Yes.
That requires
The defector's name was Joseph Valachi. He was a Genovese soldier who in 1963 became the first major violator of the Mafia Code of Silence, Omerta.
That's right, yeah.
Why do you feel like it should be destroyed?
First of all, I want revenge. Second of all, they've been very bad to the soldiers. They've been thinking for themselves all through the years. As the senator put it before, what did I get out of it?
What'd you get out of it?
Nothing but misery.
Valachi's testimony of mob life was unprecedented. He detailed the induction ceremony of new members. He confirmed the existence of the 5 families, their leaders, their structure, and he even name-dropped the commission.
What are the different positions or ratings or rank in that organization? Starting at the top, what do you have?
We have what we call argumentación. In English, you would express it as a commission.
The hearings captured the nation's attention, and the term Cosa Nostra cemented itself into American vernacular.
All of a sudden, the mob is in every living room in the country, and we start to see things like the Kennedy assassination, and then the knee-jerk reaction was, well, that was the mob, right? And the mob did that for whatever reasons. Again, not proven, but speculated. So organized crime, the mafia, really comes into our lexicon in the mid-60s, and it's cemented forever in the early 70s with the Godfather movie. That's it. And once that happens, there's no turning back.
But while the mafia's power and notoriety was reaching an all-time high, a counterattack was developing over at the FBI. The Bureau's tallest hurdle? Outflanking the mob's fortress-like code of silence. Their solution? Technology, 70s style. Special Agent Joe Cantamesa, who we met earlier, used his guile and experience as a former telephone repairman to talk his way into the homes and hangouts of several suspected mobsters. But the most notorious and most dangerous was a Bonanno captain named Alphonse Indelicato, known on the street as Sonny Red. Sonny Red was a ruthless Kappa regime, about as violent as they come, and his rank in the Bonanno hierarchy made him a very high-value target for the feds. And since Joe had already established himself as a local, now he needed to make contact with Sonny Red's sister, Marie.
In Marie's apartment at 117 Elizabeth Street, she was always home, or somebody was always in the apartment. Sonny would come back late at night, early morning, and, crash. I want to get into her apartment. I want to kind of take a look and see what it looks like, and I want to try and figure out if I could ever get a microphone in there, but I got to get in there first.
And so Joe came up with a little ruse involving a series of prank calls utilizing one of the FBI's Chinese translators.
Translator comes down to me. Her name is Ming. She obviously knows English very well. I explained to her I want her to call this number right in front of me, and I want her to start talking Chinese, ask for somebody, and then be a little bit stubborn about, not getting cooperation. She does that. Marie hangs up the phone on her. I go, all right, well, wait a minute. We call back again. She makes the second call. Marie hangs up again. This is 2 times. Marie's getting annoyed that she's getting these calls. She calls a 3rd time. I'm looking straight at her. Her eyes get real big. She drops the phone and runs out of my office. Well, that was good enough for me. Marie is going to remember this phone call. The next day, I show up and knock on Marie's door. New York Tel, we got a report of a crossed line. Have you gotten any calls? And she lights up like, oh, yeah, and then she starts complaining to me. I go, listen, I'm just here to see where the line is crossed. So, she calms down.
And just like that, Joe would soon be up on Sonny Red's phone. He was able to discreetly survey the apartment for the ideal location to install a miniature transmitter, commonly referred to as a bug.
You had to pay attention, but you couldn't pay so much attention that it looked like you were paying attention.
And if you play it cool, sometimes you even get lucky. After Joe explained the so-called crossed line problem,
Marie asked me if I could put a phone in for her, an extension. Well, that's what I was waiting for her to ask me. I said, but this is the only place I could put it in, which was in the hallway. There was a little table there, pretty close to where the room was that Sonny would conduct his business. Perfect. I said, well, I'll have to come back. We'll take care of it.
Oh, and while he was at it, could he also stop by her sister-in-law's place too?
She tells me that her sister-in-law lives at 115, and, could I go up and see what she needed? And it turns out, unbeknownst to me, this is Sonny Red's brother, JB in Delicado.
JB, he was another mobster the feds were keeping an eye on. And while not Joe's target, when opportunity knocks, you go ahead and answer. But still, the risk of being made was ever present, and sometimes it came from the most unexpected places. When Joe arrived, JB asked him to install a new touch-tone phone to replace his old rotary one.
Yeah, I could throw a touch-tone in there for a couple of bucks. I made an appointment to go back and do that. I come back later, and now I'm bringing with me one of my associates, John Kravick, because I want to show him, because when it comes time to do this, I'm going to need more than one person to do this.
Marie directs him to her mother's ground floor apartment for the access that Joe said he needed to get their job done.
I knock on the door. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning. The door opens and there's a woman about 4'10". I tell her I was just next door. We got to get in the courtyard. We're walking back. She stops dead right in front of us, turns around and points to both of our faces and says, I know you. You're the FBI. You come tap of the phones, in broken English. I look at John and I go, Grandma, who cares what you say on the phone? She paused and she laughs, and then everybody laughs.
Joe was working in the lion's den. Opportunity and life-threatening danger was literally behind every door.
John is in the basement. I'm kneeling on the floor behind an open door, drilled a hole in the baseboard. The door swings and it knocks me over, and I hear, who the f*** are you?
Looming over Joe was the mob captain himself, Sonny Red in Delicado, and Sonny was not happy. To deflect suspicion, Joe reverted to his roots, and actually being from the Bronx, he was a natural.
And as I'm getting up, I'm going, who the f*** are you? I go, I'm doing something for Marie. I said, I don't know you.
Then with some quick thinking, Joe diffuses the situation with one of his tried and true methods, convincing Sonny Red in Delicado to actually help him install the very wiretap that Joe was hoping to use to bring him down.
I go, well, listen, if you give me a hand for just a minute or two, I'll find out where the guy is downstairs, and I'll get out of here. He goes, what do you want? I go, I want you to come right here and bang this little thing on the floor, and I'm going to go down the basement and find out where it is. He says, okay. He comes over, he starts tapping it. I go out, go down the basement. John is walking around with the flashlight in the completely wrong spot. I tear down a piece of old sheetrock sort of stuff. I grab the thing, I holler up, I got it. He points, who's that? I say to John, it's Sonny. John's eyes get this big, but nonetheless, I go back upstairs, I put my little connector block in, I drop the wire down, we make the splice, and we're out of there. Perfect install.
It was one of the more daring wiretap installations of his career, because little did he know that across the river in Brooklyn, trouble was brewing, and Sonny Red was right in the middle of it. A day or so later, Joe returned to install the requested touch-tone phone.
I'm feeling pretty good. The case squad's happy. The microphone's in and working. I trot upstairs to JB's apartment. I knock on the door, and there's a little bit of a pause.
The usual time it took to answer the door had passed. Eventually, JB's wife called out.
Who is it? I go, it's Joe. Joey, the phone guy.
After another pause, Joe immediately has the thought that every black bag agent has, that his cover had been blown, and there was no telling who might be on the other side of the door waiting for him. JB's wife finally opens the door.
And I could see she's been crying. I go, you okay? And she goes, yes. And I'm thinking, all right, whatever's going on, it ain't me. I walk over to the kitchen. Over to my right on the couch, JB waves. I go over. I change the kitchen phone. I picked up my $20 tip. I leave.
And he leaves in a hurry.
As I make the last turn to the foyer, all I see is a soaking wet face and hair, and then I realize between me and that face is a large-barreled revolver right in my face that I did not see.
On the other side of the revolver was a man in obvious distress, scared, breathing heavily, and looking like he'd been running for quite some time.
I go, okay, everything's cool, everything's good.
But the man would not lower his gun. Then a miracle, as help came in the form of a nosy neighbor who recognized Joe as the phone guy.
He's okay, it's Joey, he's okay. Sally, who was one of the women I got friendly with in the neighborhood, is yelling at this person who I don't know who it is, that everything is okay. So he puts this gun back in his waistband. I walk out the door onto Elizabeth Street. I turn towards Grand, and my heart rate jumps from normal to 120. So it was a delayed reaction to what might have happened.
All those weeks Joe spent establishing himself as a local likely saved his life.
I walk down to the closest payphone. I call the office. I ask for the supervisor, Damon Taylor. I go, Damon, I just left Elizabeth Street. And Damon says to me, oh shit, I forgot to call you. Forgot to call me and tell me what? There was a hit last night. Sonny's dead. They're hunting for Bruno, his son. I go, well, I'm pretty sure I just ran into Bruno.
It turns out that the night before, Sonny Red Indelicato was one of the 3 capos gunned down in Bensonhurst at the hands of Joe Massino. And his son Bruno Indelicato had every reason to be running for his life. If there was ever any doubt that Joe had penetrated the very center of the New York mob world, it had vanished with Sonny Red's murder. The only problem, the bug planted in Indelicato's house was now worthless. Sonny was dead. But the fight wasn't. Because as it turns out, Joe and his fellow feds weren't the only ones in town getting eyes and ears inside organized crime.
Next time on Law and Order, Criminal Justice System.
We are going to utilize this to dismantle organized crime by cutting off its head.
I dream of the day that you guys put all the bosses of the families in jail in one place.
You had to be capable, competent, and dedicated to the mission. I worked literally 100 hours a week.
We're like a battleship. It takes us forever to turn the ship around, but once we get where we're going, we can knock out anybody in sight.
Law and Order, Criminal Justice System is a production of Wolf Entertainment and iHeart Podcasts. Our host is Anna Siga Nicolazzi. This episode was written by Chandler Mays and Anna Siga Nicolazzi. Executive produced by Dick Wolf, Elliot Wolf, and Stephen Michael at Wolf Entertainment. On behalf of iHeartRadio, executive produced by Alex Williams and Matt Frederick. with supervising producers Trevor Young and Chandler Mays, and producers Jesse Funk, Noams Griffin, and Rima El-Khayali. This season is executive produced by Anna Siga-Nicolazzi. Story producer Walker Lamond. Our researchers are Carolyn Talmadge and Luke Stentz. Editing and sound design by Noams Griffin. Original music by John O'Hara. Original theme by Mike Post. Additional music by Steve Moore. And additional voiceover by me, Steve Zernkilton. Special thanks to Fox 5 in New York, ABC, and CBS for providing archival material for the show. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio and Wolf Entertainment, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Thanks for listening.